In the shadow decades of the 1930s and 1940s, a new breed of war machine emerged, powerful, relentless, and shaping the future of warfare forever. These were the German panzer tanks, steel giants that roared across battlefields, striking fear and awe into the hearts of friend and foe alike. More than just weapons, they became symbols of engineering brilliance and tactical innovation under the Third Reich, forever changing how wars would be fought. Imagine vast columns of these armored beasts advancing with precision, their engines thunderous, their armor nearly impenetrable, and their guns deadly accurate. From the nimble Panzer I to the colossal Maus, each model showcased Germany's relentless pursuit of mechanical perfection and battlefield dominance. These machines were not born overnight. They were the result of secret developments, visionary minds, and lessons learned from early conflicts that shaped a doctrine still studied by militaries worldwide. But this story is not only about steel and firepower. It is a tale of the men behind the machines, the crews who braved chaos, uncertainty, and the harshest conditions to wield these titans of war. It is about the strategic minds who envisioned new ways to strike quickly and decisively, turning the tide of battle in moments. It is about innovation under pressure and the relentless drive to push the limits of technology and human endurance. As we dive deep into the history of the German panzer tanks, you will discover how these war machines rose from humble beginnings to become the spearhead of Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that stunned Europe. We will explore the evolution of their design, the fierce battles they fought, and the lasting legacy they left behind, not only in warfare, but in the lessons they offer about resilience, ingenuity, and the human spirit. If you are fascinated by history, military innovation, or simply love stories of courage and determination, this journey into the world of the Panzer is for you. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy this deep dive, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories from history's most incredible moments. Your support helps us bring these powerful tales to life and keeps this channel growing. So buckle up and prepare to step into the engine roar and steel shadows of the Führer's iron titans, the German panzer tanks. Let us unravel the mystery, marvel at the engineering, and honor the legacy of these iconic machines together. Stay tuned and let the story begin. In the wake of the devastating First World War, Germany found itself shackled by the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Among the many restrictions imposed upon the defeated nation was a stringent ban on the development and deployment of tanks, armored vehicles that had begun to reshape the modern battlefield. Yet, beneath the surface of these limitations, a determined and resourceful Germany quietly plotted to reclaim its military strength and forge ahead in armored warfare. This was not a simple task, as the eyes of the world watched closely, enforcing the treaty's terms with strict vigilance. Nevertheless, it was within this atmosphere of constraint and secrecy that some of the most remarkable stories of ingenuity and perseverance would unfold, stories that would shape the course of history and lay the groundwork for the legendary panzer tanks to come. Hidden away from prying eyes in remote locations, far from the gaze of the Allied powers, Germany began to establish secret training grounds and development sites where the future of its armored forces could be nurtured and refined. Among the most notable of these clandestine efforts was a covert training facility deep within Soviet territory, a place known only to a few as the Kama Tank School. This unlikely partnership between two ideologically opposed nations was born out of necessity and mutual convenience. The Soviet Union, itself still developing its own military capabilities, provided a secluded space free from international scrutiny, while Germany brought with it technical expertise and personnel eager to push the boundaries of armored warfare. It was here, amid the dense forests and rolling fields of this hidden outpost, that Germany's early armored units learned to maneuver, to coordinate, and to strike with speed and precision. Away from the constraints of treaties and foreign oversight, German engineers and tank crews experimented with new designs and tactics. testing prototypes and honing their skills in preparation for a future that few outside the inner circles dared to imagine. The echoes of engine roars and the clatter of tank treads became the soundtrack of a quiet revolution, one that would soon burst onto the world stage with unprecedented force. Central to this transformation was the vision of key military leaders like Heinz Guderian, who recognized early on that the tank was not merely a tool for battlefield dominance, but the cornerstone of a new style of warfare. Influenced by British theorists, but driven by a uniquely German strategic mindset, Guderian adapted and expanded upon existing ideas, emphasizing speed, coordination, and the seamless integration of armored units with infantry and air support. His advocacy for mechanized warfare, once dismissed as overly ambitious or impractical, gained traction in these hidden training grounds, where theory met practice. The development of the Panzer tank was thus not an overnight phenomenon, but the product of years of careful study, trial, and error. The Panzer I, initially conceived as a training vehicle, embodied this spirit of cautious innovation. Lightweight and modestly armed, it was the stepping stone upon which more capable models like the Panzer II and eventually the Panzer III and IV would be built. Each iteration reflected lessons learned in these secretive exercises: how to improve armor, firepower, mobility, and communication between crews. These tanks were not just machines. They were the physical manifestation of a growing doctrine that combined technological progress with tactical audacity. Beyond the mechanical and strategic aspects, the human element played a crucial role. The men who operated these tanks trained tirelessly in harsh conditions, building not only their technical proficiency, but also a deep sense of camaraderie and trust that would prove essential in the chaos of war. Stories from these hidden sites speak of long hours spent in the cold, intense drills that tested nerves as much as skill, and moments of quiet reflection where officers and soldiers alike contemplated the weight of the task ahead. They understood that their work was more than preparation. It was the forging of a new instrument of war that would soon change the balance of power in Europe. The secrecy surrounding these developments only heightened the mystique of Germany's armored forces. Foreign intelligence was often left guessing, piecing together fragments of information that hinted at a military revival, but lacked concrete evidence of the scale and sophistication being achieved. This veil of secrecy was not accidental. It was a deliberate part of Germany's strategy to conceal its rearmament and to strike when the moment was right. The 1936 Berlin Olympics even served as a subtle stage where Germany displayed controlled glimpses of its renewed strength, showcasing military prowess while keeping the full extent of its armored capabilities just out of reach. As the 1930s progressed, the Panzer units grew in both number and complexity, evolving from experimental groups into formidable fighting forces. Their impact was soon felt in the crucible of the Spanish Civil War, where German tanks first saw real combat, providing invaluable data that further refined their designs and tactics. From these early, secretive beginnings in hidden training grounds through battlefield trials abroad, the Panzer had begun its transformation into the steel spearhead of the German military machine. Looking back, the story of Germany's covert tank development is a powerful reminder of how innovation can flourish even under the tightest constraints. It highlights the interplay between technological ambition and strategic necessity, and the lengths to which a nation will go to prepare for the conflicts it foresees. The legacy of those secret training grounds and the tanks they nurtured lives on in the history of armored warfare, underscoring that behind every machine lies a story of human determination, vision, and sometimes the shadows of secrecy. This chapter of history invites us to reflect not only on the machines themselves, but on the broader context in which they were born, a world balancing on the edge of peace and war, where ambition met restraint, and where the future of battle was quietly being rewritten far from the eyes of the world. Amid the hushed secrecy of Germany's rearmament in the shadow of the Versailles Treaty, one figure emerged whose vision would redefine the very nature of warfare: Heinz Guderian. His story intertwines with the rise of the Panzer tanks, transforming them from mere machines into instruments of rapid, devastating force. Guderian was not only a product of his time, but also a forward thinker who absorbed ideas from beyond Germany's borders and fused them with his own strategic insights, ultimately pioneering a doctrine that would shock the world and reshape military tactics for generations. Guderian's fascination with mechanized warfare was ignited by the writings of British theorists like J.F.C. Fuller and B.H. Liddell Hart, men who had already begun to question the static, trench-bound combat of the First World War. They envisioned tanks not as slow, lumbering behemoths, but as agile hunters that could strike swiftly, break enemy lines, and disrupt communications. Guderian absorbed these concepts deeply, but recognized that simply copying British ideas would not be enough for Germany's unique strategic and political realities. He knew the key lay in adapting these theories to create something new, something that could exploit the strengths of German industry, training, and geography. With this vision, Guderian became the driving force behind Germany's armored warfare doctrine. He believed that tanks should not operate in isolation, but as part of a coordinated, combined arms force that integrated infantry, artillery, and air support. This approach contrasted sharply with the prevailing military thought of the era, which often treated tanks as auxiliary units or mere mobile artillery. Guderian's doctrine placed tanks at the spearhead of the offensive, supported by fast-moving infantry and relentless air reconnaissance, creating a synergy that maximized speed, surprise, and firepower. The hidden training grounds in Russia, where Germany honed its armored units away from prying eyes, became the testing ground for Guderian's ideas. There, crews practiced rapid maneuvers, communication drills, and combined arms operations. Guderian insisted on rigorous training and discipline, understanding that even the most advanced tanks would be ineffective without skilled crews, and precise coordination. His leadership style was hands-on. He often visited units personally, observing exercises and pushing for constant improvement. Tales from these early days speak of Guderian's sharp mind and fierce determination, qualities that inspired loyalty and a shared belief in the revolutionary potential of armored warfare. But Guderian's influence went beyond strategy and tactics. He was deeply involved in the development of the tanks themselves. Working closely with engineers and manufacturers, he emphasized the need for balanced tanks had to combine armor, firepower, and mobility without sacrificing reliability. This vision materialized in the Panzer III and IV, which became the backbone of Germany's armored divisions during the early years of World War II. Guderian understood that while heavier tanks like the Tiger would capture headlines, the medium tanks were the workhorses that could be produced in numbers and operated effectively across Europe's varied terrain. His ideas culminated in the execution of Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War, which stunned the world with its speed and decisiveness. During the invasions of Poland in 1939 and France in 1940, Guderian's armored spearheads punched through enemy lines, encircled forces, and disrupted command structures in ways traditional warfare had never seen. The success of Blitzkrieg was not just about tanks, but the seamless integration of all elements of warfare, a concept Guderian had tirelessly advocated. His forces moved like a well-oiled machine, combining the roar of engines, the precision of artillery, and the dominance of the skies by the Luftwaffe. However, Guderian's path was not without challenges. He often clashed with conservative military leaders who were skeptical of his unorthodox ideas and wary of the risks inherent in rapid, mechanized offensives. Bureaucratic resistance and resource constraints sometimes slowed the implementation of his doctrine, yet Guderian remained undeterred. His persistence, combined with battlefield success, eventually earned him a place among Germany's most influential commanders. His writings and experiences continued to influence armored tactics long after the war, shaping military thinking worldwide. The human side of Guderian's story is equally compelling. He was known for his directness and refusal to tolerate inefficiency, yet He cared deeply for the men under his command. Understanding the psychological and physical demands of armored warfare, he championed the welfare and training of tank crews, believing that technology alone could not win battles without skilled and motivated soldiers. His leadership style fostered a sense of camaraderie and purpose within the panzer divisions, qualities that proved crucial in the brutal campaigns ahead. Guderian's legacy lives on in modern armored doctrine, which still emphasizes speed, coordination, and combined arms operations. His ability to adapt foreign ideas and innovate within Germany's unique context demonstrates how military thought evolves not in isolation, but through cross-pollination and creative synthesis. The tanks that once thundered across Europe owe much to his vision, not just in their mechanical design, but in the very way they were used. In the grand story of the panzer tanks, Heinz Guderian stands as a towering figure, a strategist whose insight turned steel vehicles into instruments of lightning-fast warfare. His journey from student of theory to master of the battlefield exemplifies how bold ideas, nurtured through determination and practice, can alter the course of history. As we continue to explore the rise of Germany's armored forces, Guderian's influence remains a central thread binding the secret training grounds, the factory floors, and the thunderous battlefields into a single, compelling narrative of innovation, ambition, and relentless pursuit of excellence. As the 1930s unfolded and Germany quietly rebuilt its armored forces, the earliest Panzer tanks models, 1 and 2, played a crucial but often overlooked role in shaping what would become a formidable tank fleet. These early machines were not the thunderous giants that would later dominate battlefields. Rather, they were modest in design, built primarily for training and reconnaissance. Yet, their significance cannot be underestimated, for they laid the foundation upon which Germany's armored warfare strategy would be built, and their real test came amid the tumultuous battlefields of the Spanish Civil War, a conflict that served as both a proving ground and a grim rehearsal for the wars yet to come. The Panzer I was initially conceived as a lightweight tank, equipped with only machine guns, and designed mainly to train crews and test the fundamentals of armored vehicle tactics. It was nimble but lightly armored, reflecting the cautious approach Germany was forced to take under the constraints of the Treaty of Versailles. This machine was never intended to take on heavily fortified positions or rival enemy tanks head-on. Instead, it was a classroom on tracks, teaching its crews how to coordinate movement, maintain their machines under combat conditions, and communicate effectively in the chaos of battle. Not far behind was the Panzer II, a slightly larger and more heavily armed model fitted with a 20mm autocannon that gave it modest offensive capabilities. This tank served as a reconnaissance vehicle, scouting ahead of the main forces and gathering critical information about enemy positions and terrain. The Panzer II's speed and maneuverability made it invaluable in these roles, though it still lacked the armor and firepower to engage in prolonged fights against well-equipped opponents. It was in Spain, however, that these tanks truly earned their baptism by fire. The Spanish Civil War, raging from 1936 to 1939, became an international arena where new weapons and tactics were tested amid brutal and unpredictable combat. Germany, aligned with the nationalist forces, sent troops and equipment in support, including Panzer I and II tanks, not merely as participants, but as observers, eager to glean lessons that would shape their future armored warfare doctrine. On the harsh and rugged terrains of Spain, the panzer crews faced conditions far harsher than any training ground could simulate. The tanks were pushed to their limits in battles where mobility, reliability, and tactical innovation were crucial for survival. The conflict revealed critical weaknesses, thin armor that left crews vulnerable to anti-tank weapons, and guns that often struggled against enemy fortifications or more heavily armed tanks, yet it also highlighted the potential of armored vehicles to influence the battlefield decisively when used with speed, coordination, and combined arms support. The Spanish Civil War was, in many ways, a laboratory for the German military. Reports sent back from the front lines informed engineers and commanders alike. The shortcomings of the Panzer I and II drove the development of more capable models, with improvements in firepower, armor, and communication systems. The combat experience underscored the necessity of rapid radio communication between tanks and with infantry, a technological edge that German forces would soon leverage to devastating effect. Moreover, the conflict reinforced the importance of integrating tanks with infantry and air support. The panzer crews learned firsthand that tanks alone were vulnerable if isolated, but as part of a coordinated force, they could break through enemy lines and exploit weaknesses swiftly. These lessons were pivotal in refining the blitzkrieg tactics that would later bewilder opposing armies. But the Spanish Civil War also tested the human spirit within these steel machines. Stories of tank crews battling not only the enemy but also mechanical failures, harsh weather, and supply shortages painted a vivid picture of the grueling conditions faced by these pioneers of armored warfare. The bond between crew members grew strong as they relied on each other to survive and succeed in a conflict marked by unpredictability and ferocity. Back in Germany, the insights gained from Spain influenced not only tank design, but also training and doctrine. The transition from the Panzer I and II to the more robust Panzer III and IV reflected a commitment to learning from real-world combat and adapting accordingly. Each new model was a step toward a balanced machine that combined firepower, armor, and mobility qualities, essential for the rapid, mechanized warfare Guderian and others envisioned. In this way, the humble Panzer I and II tanks served a vital role as both teachers and students. They educated their crews in the realities of armored combat and illuminated the path forward for Germany's tank development. Without their early trials and the harsh lessons of Spain, the later successes of Germany's panzer divisions might have been far less assured. The story of these early tanks is a testament to the importance of evolution in warfare, the willingness to confront failure, adapt strategies, and innovate in response to harsh realities. It reminds us that behind every formidable weapon lies a history of trial, error, and perseverance. The Panzer I and II, often overshadowed by their more famous successors, deserve recognition as the stepping stones on the road to armored warfare dominance. As we continue to explore the rise of Germany's armored forces, the journey from these modest beginnings to the thunderous might of tanks like the Tiger and Panther reflects a broader narrative of ambition, learning, and relentless pursuit of excellence, a story that continues to captivate and teach us today. In the late 1930s, as tensions across Europe grew increasingly fraught, a new kind of warfare was quietly taking shape, one that would soon shock the world with its speed, precision, and overwhelming power. This was blitzkrieg, a term that means lightning war, and at its heart were the fast-moving panzer divisions, a mechanized force designed to strike swiftly and decisively. But blitzkrieg was far more than just tanks rolling across the battlefield. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support, working in unison to break through enemy defenses and shatter their will to fight. The success of this tactic in the invasions of Poland in 1939 and France in 1940 forever altered the landscape of modern warfare and cemented the Panzer's place in military history. The story of blitzkrieg is inseparable from the evolution of the panzer tank and the doctrines shaped by visionary commanders like Heinz Guderian. Having absorbed lessons from earlier conflicts and adapted foreign theories to fit Germany's unique needs, Guderian understood that the key to victory lay in combining speed, coordination, and surprise. Tanks would not simply support infantry. They would lead the charge, piercing deep into enemy lines to disrupt communications, supply routes, and command centers. Supporting them from above was the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, providing reconnaissance, close air support, and strikes against vulnerable rear positions. Together, they formed a force multiplier that overwhelmed traditional defenses. When Germany launched its invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, the world witnessed blitzkrieg in action for the first time on a large scale. Columns of panzer tanks thundered across the countryside, their crews executing rapid maneuvers that bypassed fortified points and encircled enemy units. The speed of their advance stunned Polish forces, who struggled to regroup and mount effective resistance. The Luftwaffe's dive bombers, with their distinctive Jericho trumpet sirens, swooped down relentlessly, targeting bridges, railways, and supply depots, further paralyzing the Polish military. This relentless combination of mechanized ground forces and air power prevented the enemy from establishing cohesive defensive lines, leading to a swift and decisive German victory within weeks. The lessons of Poland quickly informed the next phase of Blitzkrieg, the campaign that would test its limits on the more complex terrain of Western Europe. In May 1940, Germany unleashed its armored divisions into Belgium, the Netherlands, and most notably France. The strategy hinged on a bold and unexpected move. Rather than attacking along the heavily fortified Maginot Line, German forces pierced through the dense Ardennes forest, a region considered impassable for large mechanized units. This gamble paid off spectacularly. Panzer divisions, spearheaded by Guderian's leadership, raced through the Ardennes, cutting off Allied forces and driving toward the English Channel, effectively splitting the opposing armies and trapping vast numbers of soldiers. The integration of air and ground forces was more refined in this campaign. The Luftwaffe maintained constant pressure on enemy positions, conducting reconnaissance that guided tank movements and bombing runs that softened defenses ahead of the armored advance. Radio communications, a technology Germany invested heavily in, allowed tank commanders to coordinate attacks and respond to rapidly changing battlefield conditions with unprecedented agility. This real-time command and control was a stark contrast to the slower, more rigid systems of the Allies, giving the Germans a critical edge. But Blitzkrieg was not merely a display of military technology. It was a psychological weapon. The sudden, overwhelming attacks sowed confusion and panic among enemy troops and commanders. The sight of armored columns cutting through defenses with supporting air raids created a sense of inevitability, often causing opponents to abandon positions or surrender rather than face total destruction. German propaganda amplified these effects, portraying the Panzer as unstoppable steel beasts embodying the might of the Reich. However, Blitzkrieg's success was not guaranteed. It relied heavily on well-coordinated logistics and communications, both vulnerable to disruption. The rapid pace of advance strained supply lines, and any breakdown in communication risked chaos. Moreover, the tactic was most effective against unprepared or poorly coordinated enemies. Prolonged engagements or counterattacks in difficult terrain could stall the momentum. Yet, during these early campaigns, Germany's combination of innovation, preparation, and daring ensured Blitzkrieg's striking success. The experiences in Poland and France became case studies in the power of mechanized warfare. They showed how mobility, combined arms tactics, and air-ground integration could break the stalemate of trench warfare that had defined the First World War. These battles transformed military doctrine worldwide, forcing other nations to rethink their approaches to tank development and combined operations. Within the Panzer crews themselves, the Blitzkrieg campaigns forged a sense of pride and accomplishment, tempered by the harsh realities of war. Tank commanders had to make split-second decisions, often under heavy fire, coordinating with infantry and pilots who shared the same mission. Their stories reflect both the exhilaration of rapid victories and the somber moments when machines broke down or lives were lost. The bond between man and machine and between the different branches of the military was a vital element of Blitzkrieg's success. As we reflect on this era, it becomes clear that Blitzkrieg was not simply a tactic, but a revolution in the art of war, one that reshaped battlefields and changed the fate of nations. The Panzer tanks, once humble training vehicles, had evolved into the spearhead of a new kind of warfare that leveraged speed, technology, and coordination to devastating effect. This blend of innovation and boldness defined Germany's early successes and left an indelible mark on military history. Yet this story is not just about triumph. but also about the lessons learned from the limits and consequences of blitzkrieg. The rapid advances could not be sustained indefinitely, and as the war dragged on, enemies adapted, supply issues mounted, and the human cost grew ever higher. Still, the legacy of blitzkrieg endures as a testament to the power of innovation and the profound impact of combining technology with strategic vision. In telling the story of blitzkrieg, we uncover more than just battlefield tactics. We glimpse the complex interplay of engineering, leadership, and human courage that made this lightning war possible. It stands as a vivid chapter in the history of armored warfare, a chapter written in steel and thunder that continues to inspire study and reflection today. As World War II progressed, the German armored forces underwent a remarkable transformation, driven by both battlefield necessity and an unwavering ambition to dominate the armored warfare landscape. The early successes of the Panzer III and IV had demonstrated the potency of balanced medium tanks machines, combining firepower, mobility, and protection that could be produced in significant numbers and adapted to various combat roles. Yet, the evolving nature of the war and encounters with increasingly formidable adversaries compelled German engineers and commanders to push the boundaries further, giving rise to a new generation of heavy tanks that would capture imaginations and redefine tank warfare: the Tiger I, Tiger II, and the legendary yet experimental Maus. The Panzer III and IV tanks had been the backbone of Germany's armored divisions during the early years of the war. The Panzer III was initially designed as the main tank destroyer, armed with a high-velocity 37mm gun that was later upgraded to a 50mm gun, making it effective against most early war tanks. The Panzer IV, on the other hand, was conceived as an infantry support tank, equipped with a short-barreled 75mm gun. However, as the war unfolded, these roles blurred, and both tanks saw significant upgrades, especially in armament and armor, reflecting the German approach of continuous adaptation based on combat experience. Encountering Soviet T-34s and KV-1s on the Eastern Front forced a radical rethink. These Soviet tanks boasted sloped armor and powerful guns that could penetrate existing German tanks with relative ease. The Panzer III and IV, once dominant, now found themselves outmatched. German engineers faced the urgent challenge of developing heavier, better protected tanks without sacrificing mobility or firepower. A difficult balancing act. Enter the Tiger I, arguably the most iconic German tank of the war. Introduced in 1942, it was a game-changer, equipped with the fearsome 88mm KWK-36 gun capable of destroying enemy tanks at long range. Its thick armor made it nearly impervious to most Allied anti-tank weapons, and its presence on the battlefield struck terror into enemy crews. But the Tiger was more than just firepower and armor. It embodied Germany's technological ambition and industrial might, yet this came at a cost. Its complexity made it difficult to produce in large numbers, and its heavy weight often caused logistical challenges and mechanical breakdowns. Building on the Tiger I's legacy, the Tiger II, or King Tiger, emerged in 1944 as the ultimate expression of German tank engineering, with even thicker armor and a more powerful 88mm KWK-43 gun. It was a fortress on tracks. Its imposing size and firepower could dominate most battlefields. But these advantages were counterbalanced by its enormous weight, mechanical fragility, and fuel consumption. The King Tiger was a symbol of Germany's relentless pursuit of armored supremacy, but also a reflection of the war's shifting realities, where quantity sometimes outweighed quality. Beyond the battlefield giants stood the Maus, a project so audacious it bordered on legend. Conceived as the heaviest, fully enclosed armored fighting vehicle ever built, weighing nearly 188 tons, the Maus was a testament to German engineering daring and desperation. Though it never saw combat, The mouse symbolized the extremes to which Germany was willing to go in pursuit of armored dominance. Its massive armor was nearly impervious, and its 128 mm main gun promised unparalleled firepower. But its sheer size made it impractical, slow, and impossible to deploy effectively in most combat scenarios. The progression from the Panzer III and IV to these heavy titans was not merely a technological evolution, but a narrative of ambition, adaptation, and the escalating demands of a global conflict. Each new tank reflected lessons learned on brutal battlefields, where the balance between speed, protection, and firepower was constantly tested. The medium tank's flexibility and production ease have given way to a quest for invincibility on the battlefield. Even at the risk of reduced mobility and increased logistical strain, German tank crews faced both pride and peril operating these machines. The Panzer III and IV crews valued their tanks' reliability and versatility, enabling swift maneuvers and effective engagements. However, as heavy tanks like the Tiger and King Tiger entered the fray, crews encountered machines that were powerful but temperamental, requiring skilled maintenance and careful handling. These tanks demanded respect not only from their crews but from their enemies, who learned to fear their devastating guns and thick armor. The arms race on the battlefield also spurred rapid developments in anti-tank weapons and tactics. The Allied forces sought ways to counter the Tiger's dominance, leading to innovations like the British 17-pounder gun and more effective infantry anti-tank weapons. This dynamic interplay between tank development and countermeasures underscored the intense technological and tactical rivalry that defined armored warfare in the latter half of the war. Beyond the raw power and engineering feats, the evolution of German tanks mirrored the shifting fortunes of the Third Reich itself. Early victories were powered by balanced, versatile machines like the Panzer III and IV, while the later reliance on heavy tanks like the Tigers reflected a desperate bid to hold ground against increasingly overwhelming opposition. The Maus project, meanwhile, symbolized a bold but ultimately impractical ambition, an attempt to create an invincible weapon that could turn the tide, but was ultimately hampered by the realities of war. In the end, the story of these tanks is a tale of human ingenuity, ambition, and the harsh lessons of combat. It reveals how technology, strategy, and industrial capacity intertwine on the battlefield, shaping outcomes and leaving legacies that extend far beyond the war itself. The roar of engines, the thunder of cannons, and the determination of crews operating these machines remain vivid symbols of a complex and transformative chapter in military history. As we trace the journey from the modest Panzer III and IV to the legendary Tigers and the enigmatic Maus, we see not just machines of war, but reflections of the evolving demands, hopes, and challenges faced by Germany during its darkest and most intense years. This evolution stands as a powerful testament to the relentless pursuit of armored dominance, an ambition that reshaped the very nature of warfare and continues to captivate the imagination of historians, military enthusiasts, and storytellers alike. In the vast and tumultuous theaters of World War II, where steel titans clashed and battlefields were drenched in both smoke and resolve, the stories of legendary tank crews emerged as powerful testaments to human skill, courage, and determination amid the roar of engines and thunder of cannons. Among these tales, the names Kurt Knispel and Michael Wittmann shine with particular brilliance, their reputations etched deeply into the history of German armored warfare, not merely as fearless soldiers, but as symbols of mastery over one of the war's most complex and dangerous machines. Kurt Knispel, often hailed as the most successful tank ace of the entire conflict, was a man whose quiet demeanor belied the extraordinary feats he accomplished behind the controls of his tank. Born in 1921 in Czechoslovakia, Knispel entered the Panzer divisions with an unyielding determination to excel. Over years of brutal combat, primarily on the Eastern Front, he amassed a staggering record of confirmed tank kills, with estimates often placing his total at 168 enemy vehicles destroyed. Yet what set Knispel apart was not just his tally, but his humility. He refused to wear any medals, considering the bonds of comradeship and duty far more important than personal recognition. Knispel's success was grounded in a combination of technical skill, tactical acumen, and an uncanny ability to read the battlefield. His mastery over the formidable Tiger I and Tiger II tanks made him a deadly force, capable of outmaneuvering and outgunning opponents even under intense pressure. But it was not merely mechanical prowess. Knispel's calm under fire and sharp instincts often turned precarious situations into decisive victories, inspiring those around him and contributing significantly to the effectiveness of his unit. Parallel to Knispel's quiet legend was Michael Wittmann, whose name resonated with a different kind of larger-than-life aura. Born in 1914 in Bavaria, Wittmann's journey into tank warfare began earlier, and his battlefield exploits became some of the most celebrated and controversial of the war. Wittmann's aggressive style, combined with exceptional marksmanship and leadership, earned him a reputation as a tank commander capable of turning the tide of engagements single-handedly. His actions during battles such as the defense of Villers-Bocage in Normandy stand as dramatic examples of tactical brilliance, where he and his crew managed to inflict heavy losses on advancing Allied forces despite being heavily outnumbered. Wittmann's relationship with his tank was deeply personal. He meticulously maintained his machine and personalized it with emblems and markings, a reflection of the close bond between tank crews and their vehicles. This connection was vital. Inside the cramped and vulnerable confines of a tank, trust between crew members and their machine often meant the difference between life and death. Wittmann embodied this ethos, pushing his tank and crew to their limits while always remaining acutely aware of their vulnerabilities. The stories of Knispel and Wittmann cannot be separated from the broader context of the Panzer Crews as a whole. Tank warfare demanded not only individual skill but also seamless teamwork within the crew and coordination with supporting units. Crews often operated under intense stress, facing not just enemy fire but also mechanical breakdowns, treacherous terrain, and supply shortages. Their success depended on a delicate balance of trust, communication, and adaptability. Beyond their battlefield accomplishments, these tank aces became symbols of a complex era of figures who exemplified both the deadly efficiency of German armored tactics and the human element behind the machines. Their memoirs, accounts from fellow soldiers, and historical analyses reveal men shaped by the brutal realities of war, yet driven by professionalism, resilience, and at times, profound introspection. Michael Wittmann, for example, was not just a warrior but also a thinker. His reflections on the nature of combat revealed an understanding of war's chaos and uncertainty, acknowledging the fog that envelops every battlefield. This blend of tactical genius and philosophical insight made his story resonate beyond mere statistics of destruction, inviting deeper consideration of the human experience within mechanized warfare. Similarly, Knispel's life offers insights into the quiet dedication and unassuming heroism that often go unnoticed amid grand narratives. His refusal to seek fame or decorations speaks to a perspective grounded in camaraderie and duty, highlighting the bonds forged in the crucible of battle. The impact of these legendary crews extended beyond their lifetimes, influencing tank tactics, training, and the very culture of armored warfare. Their examples inspired future generations of tank commanders and remain points of study in military academies worldwide. The lessons gleaned from their actions, how to leverage firepower effectively, maintain cohesion under fire, and exploit the strengths of their machines, continue to inform the evolving art of armored combat. Yet, it is crucial to remember that behind the fame of individuals like Knispel and Wittmann were countless other tank crews whose stories, though less heralded, were equally marked by bravery, hardship, and sacrifice. Together, they formed the beating heart of Germany's panzer divisions, embodying the complex interplay between technology, strategy, and human endurance. As we reflect on the legacy of these tank aces, we gain not only a deeper appreciation for their skill and valor, but also an understanding of the profound challenges faced by those who operated within the steel confines of tanks during one of history's most brutal conflicts. Their stories remind us that warfare, no matter how mechanized, remains a profoundly human endeavor shaped by individuals' decisions, courage, and the bonds forged amidst adversity. In exploring the lives of Kurt Knispel and Michael Wittmann, we encounter the essence of German armored warfare, a blend of technological innovation, tactical evolution, and the extraordinary capabilities of the men who commanded the Iron Giants. Their legacies endure not as mere tales of destruction, but as complex narratives of skill, resilience, and the indelible human spirit behind the machinery of war. As the thunderous roar of German panzer tanks echoed across the battlefields of World War II, a relentless contest of steel and strategy unfolded against some of the most formidable armored opponents the world had ever seen. Among these adversaries, the Soviet T-34 and the American M4 Sherman stood out not only as powerful machines in their own right, but as catalysts for a continuous cycle of innovation, adaptation, and tactical evolution that would define the armored warfare of the era. The encounter with the Soviet T-34 on the Eastern Front was a pivotal moment in the German tank campaign, shaking the confidence of even the most seasoned panzer crews and commanders. When German forces first clashed with these tanks in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa, they quickly realized that their Panzer III and IV models, despite ongoing upgrades, were outmatched in several key aspects. The T-34's revolutionary design featured sloped armor that dramatically increased its effective thickness and deflected incoming shells, a robust and powerful 76.2 mm gun, and wide tracks that allowed it to traverse the often muddy and difficult terrains of the vast Soviet landscape with remarkable agility. This combination of protection, firepower, and mobility made the T-34 a formidable foe, capable of withstanding hits that would disable or destroy many German tanks and striking with lethal precision from unexpected angles. The initial shock among German ranks was palpable, as many units suffered heavy losses in encounters where the Panzer's advantages in coordination and communication were offset by the T-34's superior design. The response from German engineers and military strategists was swift and determined. Recognizing that the battlefield was changing rapidly, they embarked on a program of continuous adaptation, seeking to improve firepower, armor protection, and mobility to counter the Soviet threat. This led to the accelerated development and deployment of heavier tanks such as the Tiger I and later the Tiger II, both armed with high-velocity 88 mm guns capable of penetrating the T-34's armor at long range. The introduction of the Panther tank, designed specifically to counter the T-34's advantages, featured sloped armor inspired by the Soviet design and a powerful 75 mm gun. Blending the mobility of earlier Panzers with enhanced protection and firepower, however, technological innovation alone was insufficient. German tank crews had to refine their tactics, learning to exploit terrain, coordinate artillery and air support, and engage in more effective ambushes to offset the T-34's strengths. This interplay of evolving technology and tactical adjustment became a defining feature of the brutal armored battles on the Eastern Front. Farther west, the American M4 Sherman represented a different kind of challenge. Unlike the T-34, the Sherman was designed with mass production, reliability, and ease of maintenance in mind. While it lacked the heavy armor and firepower of the Tiger tanks, the Sherman's versatility, mechanical dependability, and numerical superiority made it a daunting opponent in its own right. It was the workhorse of the Allied armored forces, seen in every major campaign from North Africa to Normandy. The Sherman's advantages lay not just in its quantity, but in the adaptability and tactics developed around it. Crews became adept at exploiting combined arms strategies, working closely with infantry and artillery to cover the Sherman's vulnerabilities. Moreover, battlefield ingenuity led to modifications such as the addition of more powerful guns, improved armor plating, and innovative camouflage techniques to reduce visibility and confuse enemy gunners. One vivid example of such ingenuity comes from the Battle of the Bulge, where Sherman crews painted fake shadows and mud patterns on their tanks to deceive German tank commanders about armor, thickness, and angle, attempting to gain a tactical edge even when outgunned. These efforts underscored a critical truth of armored warfare. Success depended not only on machines but on human creativity, resilience, and adaptation under pressure. The encounters between German panzers and their Soviet and American counterparts were not isolated duels but epic confrontations in a broader contest of industrial capacity, tactical doctrine, and battlefield improvisation. The German emphasis on precision, superior firepower, and crew training met the Allies' strengths in numbers, logistics, and combined arms coordination, creating a dynamic and often brutal contest that shaped the outcome of the war. For German tank crews, facing the T-34 and Sherman was a test of skill and nerve. They had to constantly adapt to new threats, often learning harsh lessons the hard way. The mechanical reliability of the enemy tanks, especially the Sherman, posed significant challenges. Breakdowns and maintenance issues plagued German heavy tanks, while Shermans kept rolling, even in difficult conditions. This logistical edge became increasingly important as the war dragged on, tipping the scales in favor of the Allies. From a technological perspective, the German arms race led to increasingly complex and powerful tanks, but also introduced vulnerabilities. The heavy Tigers and Panthers demanded more fuel, more maintenance, and were more prone to mechanical failure. In contrast, the T-34 and Sherman emphasized simplicity and robustness, allowing faster repair and replacement in the field. This difference in design philosophy reflected the contrasting industrial and strategic realities facing Germany and the Allies. The continual evolution of tactics and technology in response to these armored adversaries illustrates the dynamic nature of World War II's mechanized warfare. It was a relentless cycle of innovation and counter-innovation, where every advantage was challenged and every weakness exploited. The German panzers, for all their early dominance, had to face an enemy armored force that was evolving just as rapidly, forcing a constant rethinking of strategy and design. Yet, beyond the statistics of tank kills and production numbers, lies the deeper story of the men who operated these machines and the harrowing conditions they endured. Facing off against the resilient Soviet crews and the tenacious American tankers, German panzer crews had to combine technical expertise, tactical flexibility, and sheer determination. The battlefield was a place of constant danger and uncertainty, where one moment of hesitation could mean destruction, and every encounter tested the limits of human and machine alike. In the end, the story of German tanks versus the T-34 and Sherman is a tale of adaptation, of how technology and tactics evolved in response to new challenges, shaping the very nature of armored combat. It highlights the interplay between innovation and practicality, ambition and reality, and the enduring importance of human skill and resilience in the crucible of war. This ongoing struggle between steel giants was not just about machines, but about the men who fought within them, the strategies they employed, and the relentless drive to overcome an ever-changing battlefield. As we explore this chapter of history, we see that the legacy of these armored confrontations continues to influence modern military thought, reminding us that in warfare, as in life, survival and success depend on the ability to adapt, innovate, and persevere against formidable odds. Amidst the relentless clang of steel, the thunderous march of armored divisions, and the intricate dance of strategy and firepower that defined World War II's tank battles, it is easy to become mesmerized by the machines themselves, their imposing designs, lethal armaments, and technological marvels. Yet, beneath the layers of metal and mechanics lies a deeper, often overlooked force that proved equally decisive on the battlefield: the human element. The camaraderie, resilience, and innovation of the tank crews who operated these iron beasts infused life and spirit into cold machinery, transforming tanks from mere instruments of war into extensions of human will and determination. The life of a panzer crew was one of constant challenge and close cooperation. confined within the cramped, claustrophobic space of the tank's interior where every move mattered. Inside these steel hulks, a small group of men had to function as a seamless unit, relying on one another's skills and instincts in conditions that were as mentally taxing as they were physically demanding. Communication was often limited to terse commands, hand signals, or subtle gestures, demanding a level of trust and understanding that went far beyond routine teamwork. This bond, forged under fire and in moments of quiet tension alike, became the lifeline of each tank and the foundation of their effectiveness on the battlefield. Camaraderie extended beyond mere cooperation. It became a source of strength and solace amid the chaos of war. Tank crews shared stories, hopes, and fears during rare moments of respite, their shared experience creating bonds akin to brotherhood. Personalizing their tanks with nicknames, emblems, or painted symbols was more than superstition. It was a way to humanize a machine that otherwise symbolized destruction and danger. These touches of personality offered a brief escape from the impersonal vastness of war, and reminded crews that behind every barrel and track were men fighting not only for victory, but for survival and meaning. Resilience was tested daily as crews confronted the brutal realities of armored warfare, mechanical failures, treacherous terrain, enemy fire, and the omnipresent threat of death or injury shaped every mission. Yet, despite these dangers, crews persevered, drawing on deep reservoirs of endurance and grit. The ability to stay focused and effective under extreme stress distinguished the best tank units, enabling them to turn the tide even when odds seemed overwhelming. Stories abound of crews repairing damaged tanks under fire, improvising solutions on the spot, and maintaining morale in the face of adversity, all demonstrating the indomitable spirit that powered these armored divisions. Innovation was another vital human factor that shaped the course of tank warfare. While engineers and designers provided the machines, it was the crews who often developed new tactics, adapted equipment, and found creative ways to exploit or overcome limitations. Whether it was modifying tanks with field repairs, devising clever camouflage techniques, or coordinating closely with infantry and air support to maximize effectiveness. These frontline innovations underscored the adaptability that was essential for survival and success. The battlefields became laboratories where human ingenuity met mechanical challenge, resulting in rapid evolution and learning that went beyond formal doctrine. The relationship between crew members also transcended mere functionality. It was deeply personal. Trusting a fellow soldier with your life inside a tank was not just strategic, it was profoundly human. This trust extended to sharing the burdens of combat, such as first aid knowledge, where crew members were often trained to tend to each other's wounds, further strengthening their interdependence. The psychological toll of war meant that these bonds were critical in providing emotional support and maintaining cohesion during the darkest hours. Beyond individual crews, the human element also shaped the larger operational picture. Commanders who understood the capabilities and limits of their crews could make better tactical decisions, balancing aggression with caution. Training programs evolved to not only teach mechanical operation but also foster leadership, communication, and teamwork skills. This holistic approach contributed to the overall effectiveness of panzer divisions and their ability to execute complex maneuvers such as blitzkrieg, where speed, coordination, and precision were paramount. The human stories behind the steel also reveal moments of unexpected humanity amid conflict. Tales of tank crews sharing brief truces with enemy soldiers, exchanging letters found on the battlefield, or reflecting on the futility and costs of war, provide a poignant counterpoint to the violence. Such moments remind us that even in the heart of mechanized warfare, the essence of conflict remained deeply rooted in human experience, fear, hope, loss, and the yearning for peace. As the war progressed, the increasing demands placed on tank crews exposed the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. Despite technological advancements, no machine could replace the judgment, courage, and resilience of the men inside. The challenges of harsh weather, logistical shortages, and relentless enemy pressure required crews to constantly adapt often pushing their tanks and themselves beyond intended limits. These struggles underscore that behind every armored triumph or defeat lay the complex interplay of human factors that machines alone could never replicate. Reflecting on the human element of Germany's panzer forces enriches our understanding of armored warfare. It shifts the focus from purely mechanical or strategic considerations to the lived realities of those who operated these formidable weapons. This perspective reveals that the success and failure of tanks depended as much on the spirit, cooperation, and innovation of their crews as on design specifications or firepower ratings. In remembering the crews who manned the panzer tanks, we honor not only their technical skill and bravery, but also their humanity, their ability to forge connections in adversity, to innovate under pressure, and to endure in the face of overwhelming challenges. Their stories remind us that in the machinery of war, it is ultimately the human element that breathes life into steel and defines the course of history. As the guns fell silent and the smoke of battle cleared, the legacy of the German panzer tanks endured far beyond the ravaged battlefields of World War II. Though the conflict had ended in defeat, for Nazi Germany, the innovations in tank design and the tactical doctrines forged in the crucible of war left an indelible mark on armored warfare that continues to shape military forces around the world today. From the lessons learned in harsh combat conditions to the technological breakthroughs, the Panzer's influence extends deep into the post-war era, reminding us of the complex interplay between innovation, strategy, and history. In the aftermath of World War II, nations both victorious and defeated examined the battlefield closely, eager to understand what had made the German armored division so effective in the early years of the war and how to counter the lessons learned. German tank designs, particularly the Panther and Tiger series, offered valuable insights. These tanks combined firepower, armor, and mobility in ways that pushed the boundaries of contemporary engineering. Many features pioneered or refined by German engineers found their way into post-war tank development programs across the globe, influencing vehicles like the American M48 Patton, the Soviet T-54, and later generations of main battle tanks. Equally significant was the influence of German armored tactics, which emphasized speed, coordination, and combined arms operations. The Blitzkrieg doctrine, with its rapid penetration and exploitation of enemy weaknesses, became a foundation for modern mechanized warfare. Military strategists studied the importance of integrating tanks with infantry, artillery, and air support, a lesson underscored by the successes and failures of German panzer divisions. This integrated approach has since become a cornerstone of armored combat doctrines worldwide, highlighting the lasting tactical contributions born from this tumultuous period. Beyond the battlefield and military academies, the legacy of the Panzer is also preserved in museums and memorials that stand as custodians of history. Institutions such as the Tank Museum in Bovington, England, and the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia hold extensive collections of German tanks, including rare examples like the Tiger and the Moss. These museums do more than display machines. They tell stories of engineering brilliance, human courage, and the heavy costs of war. Visitors who walk through these hallowed halls are invited to reflect not only on technological achievement, but also on the human experiences intertwined with these armored giants. Restoration projects undertaken by dedicated historians and enthusiasts breathe new life into these relics, ensuring that future generations can witness and learn from the tangible artifacts of a bygone era. Each bolt tightened and each panel polished is a tribute to those who designed, built, and operated these machines. Men whose lives were shaped by the vast machinery of war. Through these efforts, the lessons of history remain vivid and accessible, serving as reminders of both the possibilities and perils that accompany technological advancement in warfare. The story of the German panzer tanks is thus not confined to the past. It is a living legacy that continues to inform and inspire. It prompts us to consider the responsibilities that come with innovation, how technological progress must be tempered by ethical reflection and an understanding of history's lessons. The tanks themselves, as symbols of both human ingenuity and the devastating consequences of conflict, challenge us to remember that behind every machine lies a story of people, choices, and consequences. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the rise, evolution, and enduring legacy of the German Panzer tanks. If you found this story insightful and engaging, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's fascinating chapters. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive for everyone curious about the past. Wishing you all a peaceful and restful night. Sleep well, and until next time, take care.